Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Ayana Jean, and I'm here with Robert McCaw. Today's CAIR on Air, we're going to be talking about the results of our post-debate Muslim voter election survey. So we did a poll that asked 846 Muslim voters about their preferences for presidential candidates, political parties, and positions on a wide range of social and policy issues. So Robert is going to tell us a little about this. Why don't you start with telling us about the methods, Robert? How did we conduct this survey?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Ayan, and assalamu alaikum, everyone watching this program. We were really excited to do this survey. The methodology, how do we actually poll Muslim voters? So CAIR has a database of 146,000 Muslim voter households with landlines, because you can't survey cell phone numbers, FCC rules, if it's a telephone robotic survey. And we were able to, out of that, as Sister Ayan said, survey over 800 Muslims from the community, representing 449 men, 325 women, and just 72 individuals that preferred not to answer. So when you poll that many people, you get with such a large poll, we have a low margin of error. So it's 3.5% for this, with a confidence interval of 95%. So what does that mean? If 50% of respondents answered yes to something, that would mean that within that same 50, maybe it was actually 53, maybe it was 47, but we have a good confidence that it's right within that area, about 95% certainty. So we were really excited to do this poll. It really illuminates where Muslims stand on which presidential candidate they support, policy issues, interactions, perceptions of major political parties. And so we developed that list of Muslims off of a list of 45,000 traditional Muslim first and last names, and we threw that against national voting records. Altogether, when you look at both cell phones and landlines, CAIR's developed a voter list of over 1 million registered Muslims. So when we say there's 1 million registered Muslims out there, we really mean it, because we have the numbers and we've been reaching out to them at a national basis. So really excited to tell you about what these Muslims said.
Yeah, so I guess with that, we can get into the results. And I also want to make sure the audience knows, if you have any questions while we're going through this, please leave them in the comments, because we can pull them up and address them as we go through it.
So, all right, let's jump into it.
Yeah, so
this is likelihood of registered Muslim voter turnout. And again, we were just talking to registered Muslims here. So we asked, first question in the call, what is the likelihood that you are going to vote on November 3rd? So these are already Muslims that have registered to vote, and 89% of them responded, yes, I will. Now, if 89% of the Muslim community actually did turn out, and you lump that with the 4% of probably will, if 93% of Muslims turned out, it'd be record breaking. But people's own expectations of, am I going to vote? It doesn't always necessarily match up to reality. If we hit anywhere within 70% of registered Muslims turning out, that would be amazing. But what you can really see from this poll is that we looked at this election, and that's the blue bars, and the past presidential election when we asked that same question. And what you can see is the definitely will category jumped up over 15 points from 74% to 89%. And so that means Muslim voters between this presidential election and the last election are supercharged about getting to vote. Now, how many turn out? Inshallah, we'll see on election day, but really points to Muslims have a high interest in voting. All right, next slide. I love asking this question because it really does show how Muslims are voting across the board. Occasionally, when people turn out to vote, they might like one Republican candidate, two Democratic candidates, the Green Party candidate. You have people that do vote, per the interests of the individual. But a lot of times when people go out to vote, they actually vote party line. And so that means they vote generally for all the candidates of that certain party in the November election. And so what we saw here was that 66% of registered Muslim voters right now prefer voting for the Democratic Party, and 19% prefer voting for the Republican Party. And you can see that these levels really haven't changed too much over the past 4 years. There was a bump up for Democrats right after the election of Trump, but after 4 years, it's kind of stabilized to just about the same levels. If we could show you charts going back, because CAIR's been surveying since 1998, there was a large percentage of Muslims, 40 or 50%, that voted for George W. Bush, less so for Al Gore in the 2000 election. What we saw was an exodus of Muslim voters from the Republican Party following 2000 until really 2012, 2010. And so right now, this is kind of where Muslims stand as voters. About 19.
Robert,
Yes.
I have a question. So, like, you're saying that there's not a big difference between how we've polled in the past, but could the very small difference, could that be just due to I guess the amount of people that took the surveys? I don't know if that's different throughout the years.
No, I mean, what we've seen is that at one point more Muslims voted Republican, but because that we've just seen anecdotally Republican members of Congress or state legislatures adopting anti-foreign, anti-Sharia law bills, promoting the Muslim ban. It's not all, of course, but some engaging in anti-Muslim rhetoric that really created an exodus out of the Republican Party. But still, about 50, I would say 15 to 20, 22% of Muslim voters in this country, depending on what state you are Republican voters. And they, of course, have reasons for whether it's social issues or fiscal issues that they vote. Muslims that vote Democrat actually look at Islamophobia as one of the highest issues in past polling, while Republicans that same year said it was healthcare, and we think that was concerns about single-payer healthcare, the Affordable Health Care Act. And so, there are different Muslims out there with different political views, and they vote differently.
Yeah.
But that's kind of stabilized at this number now. So this is what we've been seeing for the past couple of years. So looking at which presidential candidate do registered Muslim voters support, Joe Biden is the clear winner in this case in the Muslim community. When you look at national polls right now, Joe Biden is anywhere between 54, 60%. He's beating Trump by 12 points in some places, but it's a little bit higher in the Muslim community. And I think, again, it's just because of the way Muslims vote by party right now. And so 71% of Muslim voters are intending to vote for Joe Biden. 18%, like we said, which matches party affiliation, plan to vote for Trump. 8% of the community did not know how they were going to vote or were undecided on how they were going to vote. A small percentage refused to answer. So we have another 12 percentage points at play. It could go to Trump. It could go to Biden. What was interesting, though, is we still haven't seen any uptick in Muslim support for third-party candidates, whether that's the Green Party or the Libertarian Party. So that's kind of how Muslims are voting right now. This question and the next question I'm actually really excited about, because it really shows why political parties need to do a better job of listening to Muslim voters and reaching out to them. So we did 2 polling questions, and we rotated the order and we rotated the answers so we could get the best responses. We actually did that for most questions on the survey, including which presidential candidate do you support. So people just can't keep on hitting one and finishing the survey. So when you poll registered Muslim voters, the majority of them, 42%, said that they have liberal leanings on social issues, while 34% considered themselves conservative and 23% preferred not to answer. I know when we did a survey back in 2012, a similar percentage, around 20-something% or so, were actually kind of saw themselves as moderate. I bet if we flipped that question response and we had moderate in there, that 23% might have been just right in the middle voters. But we can see that there's no super clear majority of Muslims on this issue, and that, again, the Democratic Party, if they consider themselves only backing progressive uh, social issues that are liberal, even though there are Muslims voting Democrat right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're liberal on social issues, but that they just view it as the right party of choice at this time.
Yeah, and I have a question about this one as well. So, did we in the survey, did we define social issues, or was that up to the person taking the survey, like their understanding of it?
It's up to their own personal interpretation of what socially liberal or conservative meant to them.
Okay.
So we didn't define it. We didn't want to spoil it. But usually, if you're liberal on social issues, you have predefined notions of what that is, as are conservatives.
Okay. And the next one is also very similar to this one. And I'm assuming same idea.
It is.
In fiscal issues, same idea. We didn't define what fiscally liberal or conservative was. That's up to the person taking the survey.
Yeah, but this is what is kind of like a magic number. So 42% of Muslim voters find themselves being socially liberal, and 42% of Muslim voters find themselves being fiscally conservative. And that doesn't mean that all fiscally conservative Muslims are socially liberal, but it does show that, again, there's this balance of social conservatives in the 30% on social issues, fiscally conservative Muslims at 42%. And you, again, 10 years ago, saw this exodus from the Republican Party. So some of these Muslims are now just voting Democrat because they don't view the Republican Party as a party of choice. But I really believe, when you do the analysis, that if we could do more questions, we'd see that some Muslims really are Republican at heart, but the party doesn't embrace them the way they would like to, so they're voting Democratic right now. So when you look at that last question and this question, what I really learned from this, and what I want, candidates running for office, what I want major political parties to learn from this, is that Muslim votes can be at play with the right messaging and the right candidates and the right invitation. And so these numbers change over time. We do see more Muslims, identifying with the Democratic Party now than they did 10 years ago. If you have a whole generation voting like this, it will kind of skew, where the political Muslim landscape is for major political parties. So I encourage Democrats to not take Muslim voters for advantage if you see us voting in high numbers. And I implore Republicans to, clean up your act, be the big tent party of Reagan, and invite Muslims back in.
I think something that's interesting about these last two questions is, I think that this is where a lot of voters find a problem when they actually come to vote. Like, are they going to go with their social leaning or their fiscal leaning?
Sure.
So that's just an interesting thing that I noticed, like, one, in just the people I know, and then seeing it actually in these numbers, it just reminds me of that.
Anecdotally, when we held a series of Democratic primary events at local masjids, there were these, right-leaning conservative Muslims on fiscal issues, and they would be trying to convince the room that, single-payer health care, universal health care, Medicaid for all, whatever you want to call it, that it's not a good idea, right? And they're entrenched in these political views. And again, CAIR doesn't take a position either way on this as an organization. We just want to defend your civil rights. But it's really interesting seeing this dynamic in the Muslim community. So this is a real fun and interesting poll. Yeah. We asked Muslim voters where they perceived the Republican Party or the Democratic Party being committed to these core principal issues. And we randomized the issue order between religious freedom, racial inequality, accessible health care, and treating all immigrants equally. We also reversed order on which party we brought up first. So it was completely randomized with our randomized sample, because we just wanted to, again, get the best results. But as we saw, where Muslims around that 70%, for Trump, not Trump, Joe Biden are voting for Joe Biden, only 65% actually saw the Democratic Party as being really committed to protecting religious freedom, or, in that 60 to 70% threshold, addressing issues of racial inequality, providing accessible healthcare, treating immigrants equally. What was interesting is, along party lines, even though you have 19% of Muslim voters saying that they, vote Republican or support Trump, not all of them thought their party, like Democrats, was fully living up to these core principles of addressing these issues. It is really interesting to see, though, if you're a Muslim and you're concerned about your religious freedom, issues of racial inequality, getting access to health care, and treating immigrants equally, the community right now really thinks the Democratic Party is standing up better on these issues than Republicans.
I think another interesting thing about this is like how you said that not all of them, people are indicating that who they're going to vote for, and then not all of them are showing that they believe the parties reflect who they're voting for. I think in that case, I heard a quote recently that was that said, when you come to vote, you're not necessarily voting for who you think is a great candidate. You're voting for the lesser of two evils. So I think that that's where this comes in. That maybe people are indicating that they're going to vote for either candidate, even if they don't think the party itself is protecting their religious freedom or racial equality.
And let's be honest, just because a candidate has taken certain positions that you disagree with, you also know when, Nancy Pelosi calls a vote or Mitch McConnell calls a vote, and they're telling their party members with the party whip, you're going to vote a certain way on this bill. A lot of the times, those personal stances that a lot of these elected officials take don't actually, show up in how they vote, because they're voting on party lines. So sometimes people are voting for a sweep of candidates because they might not like Ted Cruz, but they like the way the party is going to ask Ted Cruz to vote, or they, similar for a Democratic candidate. So this slide, who do Muslim voters think won the first presidential debate? And yes, we did update this slide on our final report. If you click it, we did write presidential the right way for all you grammar observant people out there. So we're working on it. Joe Biden, again, was the clear victor. While 72% of Muslims are voting for Joe Biden, 59% thought Joe Biden won the debate. While you have 18% of voters voting for Trump, only 14% thought he won the debate. And like the rest of America, if you saw how chaotic that debate was, 21% said they weren't really sure who won that debate. Some people probably weren't even sure if it was a debate. So, those are the numbers. I think they're pretty interesting.
That's a note I had about that as well. We're asking people who they think won. If there was a point in the debate where the moderator had to say, let's go back to the issues that people want to hear, because it became it became kind of like an attack on personal lives.
Yes.
So I think it's hard to judge who won when the whole debate was, very chaotic in nature.
Most definitely. So this is another question where we ask people about perceptions of parties, and we ask the same question about the Democratic Party as we did the Republican Party. And again, we switch order of parties to try to get the randomness and also the order of answers, so people can't just keep on clicking one and finishing our survey real quick. So this was really interesting. 42% of Muslims found the Democratic Party to be friendly. 44%, kind of the other side of the coin, found the party to actually be neutral to Muslims. 14% found the party to be unfriendly. I think that really matches the tenor of what I see online about Muslims talking about both candidates or the Democratic or Republican Party. I think it was really interesting that back in 2012, 49% of Muslims thought the Democratic Party was friendly. In 2016, in that presidential election with Hillary Clinton, it was up to 61%, and now it's dropped 19 points. And we're trying to figure out, what could that be? Why do more Muslims think the Democratic Party is just neutral? Or, why has the number gone up so high to actually unfriendly? And again, you can't really ask every question in the world. I'd love to do a follow-up survey with people and how they answered. But, working in CAIR'S office, having watched a lot of news, how it affects Muslims, we kind of narrowed it down on 3 issues that are really affecting what we believe Muslim voters' perception of friendliness or unfriendliness in the Democratic Party. And the first was that Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, 2 Muslim women that enter Congress. They're part of the squad. They're very progressive. They are pro-Palestinian. Rashida Tlaib is pro-BDS. And members of Congress, even Democratic members of Congress, really acted negatively towards these Muslim women elected to Congress on these issues. And when you see fellow Muslims being attacked in Congress by their party colleagues, it hurts. When the head of the Democratic Party and for Ilhan's state party says she's not welcome in the party, that hurts perception of the Democratic Party. When you have Democratic members trying to pass resolutions against members of their same party because they're Muslim and women and pro-Palestinian, it hurts the perception. So that's definitely a first issue. The secondary issue is what we noticed at the last Democratic National Convention. You had at least 2 Muslim speakers on prime time addressing the community. You remember Khizr Khan waving his constitution up on stage? We didn't have a moment like that. We had some side panels. And in fact, that brings up the third issue. We had a very prominent Muslim leader in one of those side panels get attacked by the Democratic presidential campaign because of their pro-BDS political beliefs. And again, that was all over the press, and that was shared widely on Muslim Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And so, these recent issues that are popping up, it's in the back of people's minds, and I think it's really negatively hit the Democratic Party. Still, while 42% believe the party is friendly and 44% believe it's neutral, or 14% believe it's unfriendly, the majority are still going to vote for Joe Biden. But I'd implore all presidential candidates, Trump or Biden, listen to Muslim voters, see what they want, respond to their calls. And again, here's another similar survey where we were talking about perception of party friendliness. 16% of Muslim voters thought the Republican Party was friendly towards Muslims. 24% were neutral. 61% of Muslim voters found the Republican Party to be unfriendly. And again, this goes back to the statements that Trump has made about Muslims, the enactment of the Muslim ban by executive order, a number of anti-Muslim statements made by not all, but some members of the Republican Party in Congress and at the state level. And in the states, the introduction of anti-BDS laws or anti-foreign laws that continue to persist, which are seen as attacks on Muslims' constitutional rights or just directly on Muslims. So that's why the Republican Party continues to be seen as unfriendly. I think you actually see some growth in friendliness. And what I can only attribute this is, in addition to the number of Muslim voters that vote Republican, again, you might vote Republican, but you might not necessarily agree with everything about the party. There are probably other Muslims there thinking they're friendly because the Republican Party in the Senate has passed, the Uyghur Human Rights Act. You have had some members of Congress push the issue of the NBA getting out of China because of how Uyghur Muslims are being treated. You've had some bipartisan support for action against Burma and their treatment of Muslims, the Rohingya. Still, I think Muslims are looking at the Republican Party to push harder on Modi, but that also seems to be an issue with some Democratic members as well. But I think that, again, if 42% of Muslim voters are fiscally conservative and 30% are socially conservative, that unfriendly quotient of like 61% could really come down if the party changed its rhetoric or policies. And then, this is our final non-demographic question of the survey, and that was Muslim voter perceptions of Islamophobia in the United States. This survey asked, in the past 4 years, did you view anti-Muslim bias or acts of Islamophobia increase? About the same response was given in 2020 as in 2018. If we went back in further surveys, the levels are about the same. The responses are all within the margin of error. So I really see it just remaining the same in the last 2 years. Muslims don't think Islamophobia has gotten any better. And when you look at FBI hate crime statistics or the reports that CAIR receives, and Muslims underreport the amount of hate crimes and anti-bias incidences, 67% thinking Islamophobia increase is pretty rational.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what this would have looked like before 2016.
I would have to go back in the numbers. Generally, it's always over 50% though, because in the run-up to the election in 2016 and 2015, you actually had a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric from Trump, and we were actually seeing a very large spike in anti-Muslim hate crimes. And then in 2012, there were issues as well. And what we see is actually there was a host of presidential candidates, not Mitt Romney, but other conservative political actors that were bringing up issues that would be perceived as Islamophobic. And you can correlate actually election campaign cycles to violence against Muslims, just because in that charged political atmosphere, some of the actors on the fringes, the right-wing extremists, they work double time in promoting their anti-Muslim narratives.
And this slide is about who took the survey.
Yep. And I think our landline surveys are traditionally a little bit more male heavy. My wife always tells me to pick up the phone, but I don't think that's the total reason why. I think it could also be just cultural, but what I did find interesting is when I went through our 2018 numbers and our 2016 numbers, I haven't had a chance to do the deep dive and cross-tabulate everyone that was male, how did they respond versus female. But the differences between the voting responses by gender are usually within the margin of error of the study itself. So I'm pretty confident in the responses being about the same by gender. On the next slide, you'll notice that because this is a landline survey and you can't just automatically call cell phone numbers, respondents do skew a little bit older. When we've looked at survey responses in the past, sometimes younger voters, especially in the primaries, were more supportive of Bernie Sanders than older voters were. I'd like to do a little deep dive into the younger voter response for Joe Biden. That might be an updated statistical press release we talk about later on about the difference in voter perception by age. That's going to be my next little deep dive.
And with that,
that was the whole survey. It was 12 questions, sponsored by CAIR and paid for by the American Muslim community. So I want to thank everyone out there that actually responded to our election campaign, because that funds us to do this type of research every year since 1998 and really look at the political trends of Muslim voters. We just don't talk about Muslim voters we understand Muslim voters, not by just engaging locally through CAIR chapters, but nationally through doing really great surveys. So far this year, we did a pre-Iowa caucus survey. We did a pre-Super Tuesday survey, and now we've done this survey, and we're going to do an election night exit poll where we ask Muslim voters how they voted. And so I'm really interested for that next survey. Because of the fundraising we're able to do this summer, CAIR chapters across the nation, starting this and next week, are going to be doing peer-to-peer texting, encouraging registered Muslim voters with cell phones to get out the vote. And we'll be doing a nationwide robocall the night before the election, also urging Muslims to get out the vote. So between the robocall and the text messages, we're easily going to at least hit 200,000 phone numbers. And when you look at the family, if you can mobilize one person in the family, if they remind people because they got that message from CAIR, we can reach upwards to 500,000 Muslim voters or more. That's half of all registered Muslim voters, encouraging them to get out the vote. So I'm really proud of CAIR's work. And again, that's just funded by you, the viewer, as they say on PBS.
And right now I'm putting the link to in the chat box section. So anyone who wants to go and look at the actual PDF. So it's up now. Yeah, so anyone who wants to go and look through the actual results, you can do that now.
Yeah, just waiting for that. Oh, you mean in the Facebook live stream?
Yeah. Feed. So in the comments for our viewers.
Cool. And yeah, everyone click on that, get your free copy.
And with that, thank you everyone for joining us for today's program. And thank you, Robert, for going through and actually putting this together, because this is really important information. And it's good to have it, all together, especially for Muslims who may not really know the climate of how the rest of the community is feeling. Like, this is really good to see where Muslims are falling on certain issues. So Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you everyone for joining us. And inshallah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Inshallah. And I'm just going to plug really quickly. Next week, we're going to release our Muslim Presidential Voter Guide and Congressional Scorecard, where we don't rank because we're 501c3, but we show how members of Congress voted on issues that are important to the Muslim community. So keep a lookout for that. We can do this whole thing again next week.
Inshallah. Okay. Assalamu
alaikum.